Hey,
She could talk sex all day.
I was giggling about that.
All day long, Rex.
That's great. That's good for you, Natasha.
That was
I'm so glad to know where do you practice? Where's your physical practice, may I ask? Or are you online?
I primarily work online, but we do have an office in Holiday. And so every now and then I'll go in there and my providers who work for me work from there too. So yeah.
Good. That's great to know.
Yeah.
That's great.
That
Rex,
was a good good topic, good talk. A lot of interesting, fascinating things discussed, and different perspectives. I really would want to start with how did you get into this, Natasha? Like, what?
Okay, so am I answering these questions because you're going to be? We're not just chatting, right? You're still recording.
Oh, we're recording, but now this is a little bit more casual and relaxed.
Okay, I just want to know if it's going to be used because I want to.
And maybe it'll be probably used. So
okay.
I want you to know that. Yeah.
How
these bonus shows come out the Friday after the show. So
okay.
But if I'm not going to put anything out that's not flattering or good. So
no, that's okay. That's okay. So I got interested in sex therapy, I would say primarily through my clients because I was working. I didn't intend to work with. I didn't go into this career thinking I'm going to work with religiously minded people. But because of my background and also where I lived geographically, I lived in the Midwest and I lived in Wichita, Kansas, right in the middle of the Bible Belt. So lots of evangelicals and lots of Catholics. I'm Hispanic, so I speak Spanish. I would talk to a lot of Catholic, especially Hispanic Catholics. And I saw over and over kind of these dilemmas being brought up about not knowing how to talk about sex, having shame around past sexual experiences, having shame about current sexual experiences and differences between the couples, having a lot of ideas about what God thinks sex should be about and how people would bring that into their lives. A lot of pain, a lot of LGBTQ folks, right? And how do they have their faith community and also accept themselves, and who they are. So over and over and over again, I just started thinking, I think I need more information. I think I need more knowledge. I'm not sure, I started realizing that I probably also have my own biases. And so when I started becoming a sex therapist, which was about 12 years into my career, I started my sex therapy training as like a postgraduate kind of emphasis. I was like, oh my goodness, I had tons of biases. I didn't realize all the biases I had, obviously, because that's why they're biases. And so it really was a wake-up call to me and having to do a lot of my own work. What am I uncomfortable with? What am I less flexible on? Why am I less flexible on those things? Why do I feel so strongly about this particular thing or that particular thing? And is that because of my religion, or is that because I'm a mental health expert, or is that because I'm a woman, or so many interesting facets. And so I'm really grateful I went down that road. And so I kind of tease that, well, South Park, how they talk about Mormons a lot. And so when people ask me, why did you become a sex therapist? I'm like, the Mormons. It was a little bit more than that, but it was, I think, my religious community and other religious communities that led me to this interest for sure.
Did you ever question why religions have, like, I guess, guardrails around sex? Did you come to that question, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, there are so many theories out there as to why religion and sexuality are so closely bedded, in so many different ways. And I'm not a sexual historian. There are sexual historians that could give you a fascinating answer or answers to those kinds of questions. But in reality, a lot of it has to do with procreation and the power of, bringing life into this world. And what that meant to so many older cultures, especially like property-wise and inheritance-wise, and whose baby is going to get the resources, right, of the estate or things like that. And we didn't have DNA testing back then where you could say, is this my baby or is this other person's baby? And so procreation became something that not just religions, but governments were very interested in kind of controlling for a lot of those kinds of reasons, which have to do with money and resources and things of that nature. And why you'll find in indigenous cultures that were more tribal and were more like the village raises the child, you get a lot less of those kinds of values of, monogamy and having only one partner and only before sex. Those more indigenous cultures kind of see those things as kind of foreign. Like, what are you talking about? We don't really think about life that way. In fact, just recently I went to a conference where a Native American woman said, we don't have single mothers. That's not a concept that we have. We have children that we raise as the tribe. And so it's just a very different perspective.
Interesting. Very interesting to think about that way, that the different cultures have different ways of doing things and have different outcomes for those approaches. It was fascinating to hear how you came into that too, just having these different interactions with different religious groups and how they were dealing with some of this stuff. You mentioned earlier scrupulosity, and that does seem to be something that's very, I want to say traumatic for people, is when they feel like just such guilt or shame over things. Did you say though that, like, your advice for them is like, what would be the best thing? Were you saying like maybe dive deeper into some of that, or try to learn that maybe it's not as bad as you think it is?
Well, scrupulosity is a term that is really, let me see, how do I want to say this? And I have a kid leaving. Okay. I swear, all the noises. Scrupulosity is a form of OCD. So I do notice that people are starting to use the term scrupulosity more kind of like we use the term depression, like just to be like, oh, you're sad, so you're depressed. But there's clinical parameters that would get you diagnosed with depression, but the culture kind of uses it like, oh, I'm depressed today, I had a low day, without it really meaning clinical depression. And I'm starting to notice people using scrupulosity in that same way. Oh, you're scrupulous, or I have scrupulosity, to mean that I'm either a little less flexible or I'm anxious. But it really, the term itself is really a diagnostic term that would put you in the OCD family. And OCD, what OCD loves to do, it's kind of a form of extreme anxiety around a topic. And it likes to attack something in your life that's very meaningful to you, right? And so for some people, when they think of OCD, it's like germs. Well, what is it attacking? It's attacking your health, right? It's attacking something that's very important to you. It's my health, and I want to be healthy and I want to stay healthy. So now I'm going to get all nervous and, kind of wonky about germs and other things. And so scrupulosity refers to religion being what's really important to you. So now your thoughts can be about, am I worthy enough? Am I doing enough? Am I good enough? Have I done enough good in the world today? Right? Can I do more? Can I pray more? And so that can have a component that's tied to your sexuality, like, oh, did I think about masturbating? Did I masturbate? Did I touch myself? Did my penis become aroused while I was taking a shower? And so then it becomes much more extreme type anxiety, rather than just people feeling like, well, I have some sexual shame and I have some sexual discomfort. That's not necessarily getting you to the level of scrupulosity, if that makes sense.
It's interesting how, there's both ends of the spectrum, to where you just be crazy and free, or you can be very, like you said, scrupulous, and that can be paralyzing too, in a very derogatory way. There's an old saying, I think it's, I want to say it's Buddhist, but I always liked it, as, one day this guy was watching this guy play a sitar on the side of the river. And he's like, how do you play that? And he's like, well, if the strings are too tight, they'll break. And if they're too loose, they won't play. And that just like lit a light bulb off in that the person asking the question's head, like, oh my gosh, there's a balance. Like, too much, you'll break, not enough, and you'll be useless. And I just thought that was fascinating. And I kind of equate that to what you're saying about scrupulosity being a really like paralyzing and traumatic thing too.
Yeah.
Getting too tight.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, oftentimes when our lives are in balance is when we're in the best space of well-being, right? And when our lives are kind of in extremes, that is not so great. Now, that doesn't always equate to behavior, right? Because you could have somebody who has sex 3 times a day, and you could have somebody who has sex once a month, and they would both be balanced in their lives, because of how they observe themselves, of how they interact with the world, with the agreements they have with their partners, with all kinds of things. Where we become unbalanced is more in the energy around things, that we're either feeling like I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing or don't want to be doing. And so then it drives my anxiety up, which actually usually increases our behavior versus decreases our behavior. Or I am despondent and I want to be doing more, but for whatever reasons, maybe depression or whatever may be getting in the way of it, I'm not doing the things I want to be doing. So, but I think sometimes with sex in particular, people have a lot of ideas about what is behaviorally incorrect to begin with, without it really having the context of their lives and their lived experience, right? So,
because of all the stories we've heard, right? From family,
Right.
from religion, from life, from
Right.
movies. Yeah.
right, like some people,
No wonder we're so confused.
like people might take an asexual person and say, well, they can't be healthy because they're not having enough sex, right? Or they might take somebody who's having sex 3 times a day and say, well, they must be a sex addict, or they must, they care too much about sex. And again, there's no context of that person's environment, their biology, their relationships, their values, and that all puts into play. So that's one thing that I've learned as a sex therapist, is to not come to any conclusions about a person's health until I have a lot more information about their story and what they want and where they're coming from and what's motivating them. Is shame motivating it, or is pleasure motivating it? Even that simple question can really change the trajectory of how you think about any one behavior.
I wanted to ask one more question. I could talk about this all day, of course, but you had mentioned you'd mentioned pornography earlier, and I was raised that basically the problem with pornography is you're just kind of learning to objectify a person and see them more as just a tool for your gratification. But you seem to have mentioned it in more of a casual way, so I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting argument. I mean, I think that can happen, but I think that can happen at church while you're watching people on the pew sitting next to you. You can objectify somebody. So again, I think we jump to conclusions about what pornography is about. Why don't we say that about any movie then? Why don't we say that about any show that we watch? Why don't we say that about any advertisement? I don't hear everybody coming online and saying, I can't believe we have a lipstick advertisement. That's objectifying people. It kind of is. Lipstick advertisements were kind of objectifying a part of our body. And so it's kind of a complicated relationship, because on the one hand, we are all objects. we are objects, and we relate to each other as objects. We're either attracted to an object or we're not attracted to the object. There's certain things that we've decided in culture make us more attractive, right? Like wearing lipstick if you're a woman, or having abs if you're a man. Well, not all women wear lipstick, and not all men have abs, and still they're found attractive by other people. I mean, so there's just so many wonderful kind of ways to rethink these very rigid, it's always objectifying, right? So objectifying to me means that all you care about is the object itself, and you don't have any sense of the value of the person in general. That could be true of any movie we watch. We don't know those people. We don't have relationships with those people. We're basically watching those people for our own pleasure, and we're enjoying leisure, right? And we've agreed as a culture that it's kind of okay to do that, except for when it's sexual. For whatever reason, we don't agree that it's okay when it's sexual. And so I think that's one of those things that we can take an opportunity to look at and say, why, if I feel this is so important, why then am I not holding all the types of media to that same standard? Why only this type of media? And the real answer there, I think, is that it's less about pornography and more about the fact that we are very uncomfortable with sex and with talking about sex and with being confronted with sex. It kind of happens, as long as it's happening where nobody can see it and it's in the dark and the lights are off, then we're comfortable with it. But that's not actually how humans work. And it's been in our literature since the very beginning. It's been in our poetry. It's been on our cave drawings. It's been in our art. Now we're at a point where we actually have video. So it's in our video, right? It's a new medium that's fairly new to the human race. But sexuality has shown up in every medium since the beginning of known human experience. So there's not anything really that different about it. And I don't think that means that we've all objectified each other. Objectification has been alive and well. Sexual criminality has been alive and well way from the beginning as well, right? And so these mediums can either help enhance us. Pornography can be used to enhance a couple's experience. We have research to support that, just like pornography can destroy a couple's experience. But that's true of vanilla sex. That's true of a sex toy. That's true. So I would encourage people to stop thinking of things as bad or good and say, how are these things being used? And are they being used for our enhancement or for our detractment of pleasure and commitment?
Great question.
Wow.
Great question.
Yeah. Natasha, you've been so gracious. Thank you. Yeah, we've gone over time, so thank you so much for your time and your insights.
You're so welcome.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.